It's for real.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Nostalgia Crackdown here on the Let's Get Ready Network. I'm Adelia, that's my buddy Josh, and this month we are talking about one of my favorite Schmoedown matches of all time, the Schmoedown flu game, if you're familiar with the basketball reference there. Rachel Cushing versus Mara Knopic in the Innergeekdom Tournament in 2018. Josh, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, and I think this is a great first match to cover. I'm really excited to get into it because if you were watching the Schmoedown in 2018 and you saw this match, it's definitely a match that you will almost always remember. It's one of the greatest matches in Schmoedown history, arguably the greatest, which a lot of people say for different reasons. Definitely, you can maybe argue also one of the most controversial matches, as we'll get into, based on just how good but also bad it was in some way for the competitors, and just there's so much to dive into in it, and I feel like there's no other match we can start by having our first full match episode on than this match.
Totally agree. We're gonna just dive into this entire match. We have up on the website, letsgetreadynetwork.com, a retro Schmoedown match report for this match is up on the website. If you aren't familiar with the match itself, or you need some refresher on the necessary details of like questions missed and accuracy ratings and stuff like that, that'll be on the match report. But let's start talking about this match, Josh.
Absolutely. So before we even get to the match, let's talk about what was going on during this match. It was the Innergeekdom Tournament, specifically the tournament that was ran by Mike Kalinowski during Corruption. It's a bit weird for a tournament because we didn't really have a bracket system going on. We didn't really know who was playing next, and we were told, hey, this person's playing this person. Actually, never mind. They're playing a different person because Mike said so, which I think made it very easy scheduling-wise if something was canceled to be like, well, Mike was just pulling the strings all along, and he wanted to create chaos. But it was a fascinating tournament to go into, and this was also Mara's introduction to the Schmoedown. She made her debut within this tournament, and this match against Rachel is, I believe, her either third or second match.
Third match.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Third match ever, as she's in the semifinals in this tournament. And for both competitors going into it, the Mara showed a lot of potential, but everyone thought Rachel was the favorite going into this tournament. Everyone thought Rachel was going to win this tournament, and it was going to be the build-up of Rachel versus Mike in the finals. But Mara then comes out of nowhere and is an absolute, as you will say, brown dwarf star, and catches the league. Everyone loves her. The league falls in love with her, and she knows her stuff for sure. But it's interesting that she does it in a way where she's not answering the most first-round questions, which we haven't seen a competitor do that in Innergeekdom and be able to win the belt. So there was a lot of, I remember also Frank Janish being the most skeptical on this on the rundown about her chances moving forward to beat Rachel. So Mara was definitely the underdog, but she'd proven her stuff. Both were great competitors when it came to both the character work and the knowledge. And no matter what, I remember watching this game, it's like, it doesn't matter who wins, because whoever wins will make a great matchup for Mike. So going into this match, do you remember any of your thoughts going into this match, Adelia, who you were rooting for? What your thoughts on with this matchup?
I was so excited going into this match. Rachel Cushing was one of my favorite players of all time in the Schmoedown, and Mara was fast becoming one of my favorite players too. I loved Mara's energy in her first two matches, just this like laid back, this is cool, but I'm not taking this super, super seriously the way some other people were taking Schmoedown super, super seriously at the time. She just had a great vibe about her. I loved the brown dwarf star thing that she'd established, I think, in her first match, maybe her second match. But I remember thinking, okay, this is going to be good. It's going to be close, but I think Rachel's going to win, simply because Rachel had the more experience in the Schmoedown with the format and everything. And like I said, Rachel's one of my favorites. I always wanted Rachel to win. So I I knew though that this was going to be very interesting when we saw the strengths cards that came up during the Schmoedown broadcast, and so we have those here. A couple screenshots. So I knew this was going to be good when we have Rachel's strengths: Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Star Wars, and everything. And Mara's strengths: Star Trek, MCU, Star Wars, and everything. It was just such a great way. I thought Christian and Mark were especially great in this match as well. It, like, setting the table of this is a heavyweight collision in the semifinals of the Innergeekdom tournament, even though they really didn't have all that many matches in the Innergeekdom division, because this was still sort of the first beginnings of the Innergeekdom division. There hadn't been a ton of matches up until this tournament. So what did you think, Josh?
Absolutely. You make a great point, because both of these competitors go on to win championships. Mara winning multiple championships in the Innergeekdom, Rachel winning in a championship in Innergeekdom, but also in other divisions. But at this point, I don't believe Rachel's won the teams yet, and I don't believe Mara has won the Innergeekdom yet, or Rachel has won the Innergeekdom yet. So they're both very promising players, but they're both beltless. And if you look down the road, they both are in the argument for Mike is probably the greatest Innergeekdom player of all time, just because of the number of championships he's run. But they're both in the argument for number 2. It's like them and Smets. And I think a lot of people give Smets has the edge. But if you look at their resumes from their careers after they were finished, and you count them up, it's like, oh, these are 2 Hall of Famers. This is like Larry Bird versus Magic. This is 2 incredible players. But going into this match at the moment, these were 2 very, very promising players, but they never won belts yet. And this Innergeekdom tournament was a great opportunity to win their first belt.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the match now. Round 1. Josh, what were your thoughts watching round 1?
I thought it was going mostly expected, as in Mara only got 5 out of 5 questions in round 1, which is very, which Mara was a tiny bit inconsistent within her tournament run with round 1 accuracy, and 5 questions is rough when you're going up against Rachel Cushing. Rachel got 8, so that's a 3-point difference. That doesn't mean the game's over, obviously, and as we'll see, the game obviously wasn't over. But people thought Rachel had the edge because of round 1. And once Rachel got the edge, as in once Rachel got the lead early on, it's like, well, this could be it. Rachel's so good that, like, she might not. It's very tough for her to relinquish that lead, if you will. So at this point, I was like, okay, Rachel's got the lead. I think that makes sense. And now Mara just has to stay in the game long enough, hopefully, for the 5-pointer, or, maybe a round 2 to gets a bit interesting in some way. But I don't know. I thought it definitely, like, if you go into round 1 and you watch it for the first time, you don't think, oh, this is going to be one of the greatest matches of all time. Some matches immediately you're like, oh, this is a great, I'm going to remember this forever. This is going to be one of the greatest matches of all time. Immediately round 1, I was like, oh, okay, this is going pretty expected in some ways. I wish Mar got a couple more points, but overall, she's still in it. Rachel didn't get a perfect round. So it was a very interesting round 1, but it wasn't something where you were like, oh, we aren't at the point where we know this is a great match of all time yet.
Absolutely. Mara missed the 5 questions in round 1 in the categories of DC, Middle Earth, Marvel, Heroes and Villains, and Mixed Bag. And Rachel missed the Marvel and Heroes and Villains questions, so nobody had a perfect round. There were some tough questions in round 1. I rewatched the match today before we filmed this, and like some of the questions, like the Marvel question was, in Daredevil, what does Bullseye use to kill a talkative old lady passenger on a plane? And the answer was a peanut. Mara's answer was oxygen mask. Rachel had guessed a fork. I never would have remembered that that's a peanut. And who played Red Sonja in 1985's Red Sonja was the Heroes and Villains question. And this was, I don't remember if this was the first instance, but this is definitely one of the instances we got of Mara's response of, if I don't know the answer, I'm just going to say Al Pacino, because her answer to this was Al Pacino. Rachel answered Natasha Henstridge. It was Brigitte Nielsen. This was a competitive round one, but not as close as I maybe necessarily thought it was going to be. I thought Mara, like, it was incredibly obvious by the end of round one to me that they were both a little off because there were questions that were difficult, but I didn't necessarily think would be like automatic misses for either of them normally. And it became, the commentators, Christian and Mark, throughout the game were very clear about the fact that Rachel was very sick. Mara had just been in a car accident. They were not well in this match. And I think that it's just phenomenal that they were able to compete at such a level in this match, given those circumstances.
Absolutely. And I'll comment on two quick things about your response. Great response. What I'll say is you also, when you look back at these old matches, you take for granted how consistent the questions are for the later seasons with round one, round two, round three. They really got it down to the science of like, okay, this is a round one question. This is round two, to the point where the action guys made a whole show based on the questions being like, okay, this is a typical round one question. This might be a bit hard for a round two question, but it's fair. And I think for the most part, they're very, very consistent in the later seasons. This season, there are moments where you get that bullseye question, and that Deadpool question, like that's not a round one question, or not. I don't want to say, again, that difficulty is subjective, but there's less consistencies in these round one questions. Sometimes you just get a really hard round one. Sometimes you get an easier one. They're definitely, and there are moments where you're like, oh, this was a harder than normal round one. I remember looking back on this match, I'll say it didn't hit for me yet that these two players weren't on their game. I was like, oh, this is a harder than normal round one. This is tournament semifinals. Usually when it comes to the later a tournament goes on, the harder the questions get. And so I actually wasn't going into this match. I wasn't expecting them to be perfect in any way. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, listen, they're going to be good. But like when it gets to these tournament finals and semifinals, it's just the questions are going to be up there. They're going to be more difficult, especially in Innergeekdom. And I didn't realize they were off yet, even with Christian and Mark. But the more the match goes on, the more prevalent it becomes. Definitely. Like in round one, some people notice it. But like I will say, I was still in like, oh, I didn't think they were off. I still thought that like, or at least I didn't like fully put together how difficult it must have been to be in those circumstances, whether to be very sick or to be in a car accident and then do this type of thing. It didn't fully sit into my head at this point, but there are the hints looking back on it that like, oh, okay, it's going to be this type of match. And that's also what gave this match so much flavor, for better and for worse, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Absolutely. So at the end of round one, we had the score of 8-5 for Rachel. Let's get into round two now, Josh. What were your first impressions of round two looking back on it?
Looking back on it was interesting. Like, it was definitely like, this is when I noticed, oh, okay, things aren't 100%. They definitely don't feel like they're on their A game. And in that moment, this is where I feel like this match became almost like, no matter how it was going to end, it was going to be a memorable match. Just to see these two competitors, A+ competitors, fighting it out, despite it not being 100% on either of them, and also getting some difficult questions, in my opinion. Like, not easy questions at all in either category, and both competitors just doing their best and doing, honestly, a very good job. I think it was a really interesting round two, and in the end, I don't think the scores changed that much. I believe it's Mara gains a point. It becomes a 2-point game. Is that correct, or is it still 3?
It's a 2-point game by the end of the second round.
So it is a 2-point game. So Mara gains a little ground, but in total, it's Rachel still got the edge heading into that final round. So if you look at the impacts of the result, but it definitely wasn't. Sorry, a little bit of brain fart there, but this match definitely, at least round two, was starting to take my breath away. It was starting to relive it and be like, oh, right, this is the moment where I was like, man, these two are amazing for fighting it out, and despite the circumstances. And it's also kind of painful to watch on the rewatch, knowing all the circumstances and the history of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought to this point that Rachel was handling the circumstances better than Mara was, but it was in her second round. She went first. She spun mixed bag first, decided to spin again, and got heroes and villains. And she went to multiple choice on her fourth question, which was about the film The Losers, which I at that point had never heard of, so I could understand her going to multiple choice. But it was the fifth question in that round that made me go, "Oh, Rachel's not on her game as much as I thought she was," because the question was, "What does Steve say to Peggy when Peggy asks how he feels after the super soldier procedure in Captain America: The First Avenger?" And she went to multiple choice on that and said, gave the answer of hungry, C, when the answer is taller. And Mara immediately stole that. And that was the first steal. Mara had missed the previous miss that Rachel had. So that was a point to get Mara back in it. And I was like, okay. Then Mara spun, also ironically, first spin mixed bag and spun again and got Marvel movies. She went to multiple choice twice, answered four of the questions correctly, and got out of the round with a down only 2 points to Rachel. The first question in Mara's Marvel movies round I thought was also pretty difficult. It was 2015 Fantastic Four. Where is Sue Storm originally from? And Mara said Czechoslovakia. She didn't check to multiple choice. Rachel said Romania, and the answer was Kosovo. And I never would have gotten that. Ever. You could have given me multiple choice, and I never would have gotten that.
That's a question where it's like that feels like a 5-pointer unless you go to multiple choice. Like it feels like a question designed to get the competitors to go to multiple choice at least once.
Yeah, yeah. So the score at the end of the second round was 14-12 to Rachel. Rachel's still in the lead. Rachel used a JTE in that round, but we were going into what we thought was going to be the final round with Rachel with a 2-point lead. When we get to round three, Josh, what did you think of round three?
I mean, round three is one of those examples again, and I say this all the time. I've become a broken record of the 5-pointer being the great equalizer. Is like Rachel's in control, honestly, this entire game. Mara's keeping up within distance, but Rachel by far has been the one who's been more accurate, has been able to keep the lead the entire game, and Mara even misses, I believe, her 3-pointer. But then
Yes.
yes, but despite all that, Rachel misses the 5, and because Rachel misses the 5, it becomes a tie and it goes to overtime, and you could just see the like once the realization is like, oh, we're going to overtime, it's like the match suddenly changes. It feels like on all aspects. It feels like yeah, we were having a good time, but like as the match realizes how much of a drag and how much of almost a mud fight this will be, how much
Mm-hmm.
it becomes much more of a slog and much more of like, again, honestly, when we were watching this, this was a very painful rewatch, despite it being one of the greatest matches of all time. Because once you realize both these competitors were not feeling 100%, and the ramifications of this match just on both these competitors and how pained they look on some of the expressions, it's not a fun rematch, but it's such a unique match and it's a memorable match. And it's in 1 point. If 1 point goes, if one competitor was a tiny bit sharper, and gets 1 point, whether Mar gets 6 points instead of 5 in round one, or Rachel is able to get that multiple choice with the Steve Rogers question about hungry or taller. This is an overtime game, and you might not think of this probably as the greatest match of all time. You might not think of this a match of even having a lot of, or it'll be influential, but not in the way that I think this match ends up becoming and remembered. But because it goes down perfectly to the point where we're going to overtime, especially with Mara missing her 3 and Rachel missing her 5. It could have, if Mara misses her 2 instead of her 3, just so many different ways we could have avoided overtime. But it almost felt like just because of how much of a drag down fight this was, there's no way this wasn't going to overtime.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's just go over the questions. Amara's 3-point question that she got wrong was in Lord of the Rings. What are the giant elephant-like creatures called in the Two Towers from Return of the King? She didn't have an answer for it, and it's, of course, Oliphaunts or the Mumakil. the funny moment in there where Christian asked Rachel if he pronounced Momokill correctly, and he did. Rachel's 5-point question that she got wrong was in Who Said It, which was, none of you seem to understand. I'm locked in here with you. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me. Who said that? She said Ultron. The answer is Rorschach from Watchmen. And we ended up the third round at the score of 19 all. Rachel used all of her JTs, the rest of her JTs on that last question. And we're headed to sudden death. And it was quite a moment to realize, okay, not only do we get more of this phenomenal match, because I was enjoying the tension that was building throughout this match, but the fact that they just looked so miserable was something else. Before we get into overtime, let's take a moment to hear from Justin on how you can help support the channel.
Hey guys, it's Justin, aka Hambone, just here to let you know a couple of things that we have going on with the channel. One, we have a Patreon. If you can and want to support us, you can do that. As little as $1. You can join the Discord. We also have a merch store where you can get some cool shirts, mugs, and stuff with all of our different shows and labels on there. And thank you for all of our supporters that have already been there with us.
Now I want to start the overtime conversation with this screenshot. This is from right before overtime began, right before they asked the first question. I just feel for both of these ladies, even in hindsight, because they look miserable. Like, they just look absolutely like they want to be anywhere other than where they are. And the fact that they looked like this at the beginning of overtime and then proceeded to give us an 11-question deep overtime, which truly was filled with a lot of misses, for sure. Rachel missed 7 questions. Mara missed 6 of the 11. But the tension that was building because they kept missing the same question, or missing the same question, but also both giving the same answer to that question, was just pretty astounding. Josh, what did you think of overtime?
Absolutely. I will say that I don't know if this is the greatest Shmoedown match of all time, at least for me, but I think this is the greatest overtime of Shmoedown history. And that says a lot, because we've had a lot of great overtimes. And you can even make the argument we've had a great overtime for, I think it was Demolanta versus Damon, which is probably the only one in contention, with that amazing one where they both kept hitting and hitting and hitting and couldn't miss. Yeah. But this one, I feel like trumps it just because of the pure circumstances part of it, but also just they weren't on their A game. They weren't 100%. But despite that, they were still giving it their best shot. They were still going toe to toe with each other, still showing off their knowledge. And it really felt like at any point it could be over. Well, with the Demolanta versus Damon match, it felt like it will never be over, which is a different feeling. And some may prefer that feeling. But to me, it's like, this could be over in the next question every single time. And not because those ladies don't know their stuff. They obviously do. But just because I think that Rachel ends up missing 7 questions and Mara misses 6. And you could just see, like, oh, my God. The Innergeekdom questions also. The question writers did an absolutely fantastic job. So the questions were absolutely on point. So it's like, yeah, these questions could absolutely trip anyone up. Like, I was sitting there and unless it was like a Marvel question, I don't know the difficulty of the question, but it really did feel like that every question could have been their last. And the fact that they were giving some of the same wrong answers even shows that. It's definitely an overtime that will be remembered. And like, it really, really sucks that it looks like they're in pain, or that they're not having fun, and that they're definitely going through a slog and just having a tough time finishing the match. But that is what makes it so much more enjoyable for the viewer. And that does give at least me a bit of a moral dilemma when thinking about this match, when watching this match, and why it's sometimes painful for me, because they are putting on such a fantastic show. They are really putting on an all-time match, which I would say until you get to later seasons, there's no question this is the greatest match of all time. It's very few that can even come close to this match being the greatest match of all time. And the fact they're putting on such a show, and the pain is in their circumstances, in the pain, and the fact that they aren't having fun almost adds to it. is something that's makes this match so unique and remembered within Schmoedown history.
Absolutely. I want to go through the 7 questions, the 6 that they both missed, and then the final question, just to talk about how close they were coming on some of these questions to ending this. The first question that they missed was question number 3. In 1990's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, what MLB slugger's style of bat was Casey Jones using in the fight in the park with Raphael? In this, Rachel answers Nolan Ryan and says she doesn't know anything about baseball. Mara answers Babe Ruth. The answer is Jose Canseco, and there's an interesting comment from Mara after the fact that it's Jose Canseco was revealed as the answer, where she says, "I was thinking of writing that, but I wasn't sure if it was a player or a food," which just made me laugh on the rewatch, even though they were having. It's like, okay, they're still having a little bit of fun.
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. And that type of question is just like. That just shows you the Innergeekdom is just a different kind of beast. The fact that that's almost a fair son and death question to me,
Yeah.
it's like you're never getting that type. If that question is in singles, that is like a 10-point question probably for the competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. The second question that they missed was question 4. So the very next question. Who plays Coach Boomer, a.k.a. Sonic Boom, who is in charge of power placement in 2005 Sky High? Mara answers first this time. She says Kurt Russell. Rachel says Jeff Bridges. The answer is Bruce Campbell. So we play on. Then we've got the question 5, which is the next question that they missed. What is the name of the futuristic city in Big Hero 6? Rachel answers first and says San Fran, Tokyo. Mara answers New Tokyo. The answer of the question is San Francisco. So Rachel was 1 letter off from ending it right there.
That's such a cruel question, just because you have to read. Rachel knew the joke, or at least what they were doing, is that they're combining San Francisco and Tokyo. But you have to get the exact type of thing right. It's not San Fran Tokyo. It's San Fran Tokyo. And because of the way the Schmoedown is played and how you have to rule that, you have to rule that as incorrect, despite Rachel obviously knowing the question and being so close.
So close.
And if she takes out that Tokyo and it's just Sokyo, like the Schmoedown history is completely altered in a huge way, in my opinion.
I agree, because anything could have happened in the finals of this tournament if Rachel had moved on. We obviously know what happened with Mara moving on. But yeah, so the next question they missed was question 7. In Back to the Future, in the photograph, Marty's sister's sweatshirt says class of what? They both said 1983. The answer is 1984. Very close. Then the next one that they missed was question 8. Which one of the Star Wars saga films features a camera pan up instead of down after the opening crawl text? They both say Rogue One, and the answer is Attack of the Clones. Then
that's a brutal question as well. Let me just say, you have to remember that's an interesting question that they don't even like. I'm trying to remember if they ever kind of like phrase a question that way. It's like, which time is the shot filmed this way instead of this way? I can't even remember another instance where they kind of use that question.
Now that you mention that, I'm not sure I can think of another instance of a question like that in Schmoedown either. Then this was the last question they both got wrong. Question 9. In the losers, so another losers question, what is the nickname of the team's cowboy hat-wearing sniper played by Oscar Janeda? They both said Tex, and the answer was Cougar. So then we come to question 11, the final question in this match. Who said there's only one God, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that? This is obviously a moment where it's like, okay, you can think of a couple of different superheroes that might have a reference to God, and they both sort of went with the 2 different answers I would have come up with for this. Mara says Steve Rogers, Captain America, and Rachel says give it to her because her answer is Superman. And then when she heard Steve Rogers, she remembered that scene in the Avengers, right when Steve is about to jump out of the plane. He says it to Black Widow. So yeah, Mara wins. Final score 24-23. Big embrace between the two of them at the end. But there were lots of quips in that overtime about how, like, Mara wanted to know if she could pause to go take a pain pill. And they both at one point say they're both about to be sick, so can we hurry this up? Christian at one point says the final question, then he goes, well, it might not be the final question. Like, there were lots of little references in that into, like, we are trying to hurry through this, and I just felt so bad for both of them by the end of this match. But I was very happy for Mara, and that was a huge win.
Absolutely. It's what makes this match so memorable and great, but also so painful, as I said.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is your overall thoughts on the history of this match and where it affects the overall lore of the Schmoedown?
I think there's so much to go into because not only Mara ends up not only winning this match, but then beats Mike Kalinowski and Jason Inman, and that becomes her rookie run to the belt and the Innergeekdom belt. It sets up the great rivalry between her and Kalinowski in a lot of ways. And then we built that up a little with the cutscenes, but you could have had those great cutscenes and then they never play each other for like a year. The fact that you had those cutscenes and then they play each other immediately sets up the rivalry. And I remember there was a Schmoedown backstage. I don't remember which one it was, that where Mara goes on. She talks about the match and how that match was so painful for her. When it came to sudden death against Mike the next time, she almost kind of like shut down because of the memory of and like how painful that last sudden death was. And
Yeah.
you can make the and I remember I think she puts like some of the reason of her Schmoedown burnout out is part of this match and how much of a toll it took. So like I wonder, there is a part of me that looks at this and is like, man, this match it had so many things that affected later on, whether it was Mara's first title, the rivalry with Kalinowski, the kind of like fatigue she had with sudden deaths. And I'm not saying this match is the reason she lost to other sudden death, but it is something that clearly that she said on backstage mentally affected her in some ways. And like it's a fascinating match in so many ways that has a unique place in Schmoedown history. I think maybe the most unique place out of all the matches. There's nothing quite like it, and I don't think there will ever be something, if they bring the Schmoedown back, that can ever replicate this in a real way. Because I think after this experience, there's no way they would do anything like this again. I think
Right.
Christian has a line when he talks about this match where it's like he asked Mara if she could play, and Mara's like, if Rachel's going to play, then I'm going to play. And then Christian asks Rachel the same thing, and Rachel says, if Mara's going to play, I'm going to. I'm probably like not saying the quote exactly right, but it was that mindset where it's like I think if Christian. I think after this match, there was no way he was going to, because even though it was a great product, I don't think he was ever. If this ever were to happen again, he would just delay it. He's like, listen, I'm stepping in here. We're not having this match. We're delaying it. We're doing something. We'll figure out a storyline, because this match did take a toll, or it felt like it took a toll on both the audience and the competitors, despite it being such a great and memorable match.
Yeah, the tension in the match and the quality of the match are sort of like secondary to me to the welfare of the players in the match. And I agree with you and Christian, if that's his thoughts, that this is not something you do again. If one of them, if both of them are this sick and this much in pain as Rachel and Mara were on that day, you don't have the match, and you don't not break for them to take a pain pill or go get sick or whatever the scenario was going to be that day, because the welfare of the players has to be taken into account too, because this is a mental game, but this took a physical toll on both of them on that day.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where it's like it's an easy mistake to make, because it's tough to stand in a competitor who's ready to compete and ready to be like, hey, I want to get my Innergeekdom title. I want to have this match. I want to win my belt. I want to put on a show for the fans. And hindsight is always 2020.
yeah.
But there's certain moments where you have to just step in, and I wonder. I think if Christian had the opportunity, I think he would have gone back in time and stopped this match from even happening, despite it being such a memorable and great match and beloved and arguably the greatest match of all time. Because what also makes it the greatest match of all time makes it, in my opinion, the most painful match to rewatch.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I can watch people getting, low scores and being knocked out and stuff that is hard to watch because you never want to see a competitor go through that. Much easier that I can watch this match. Like this match today, like my anxiety was rising as I was watching it, even though I knew the outcome, I knew what was happening, I knew everything that was going to happen. It just feeling for what those two ladies were going through in that moment.
And I will quickly say, and even knowing that after this match, both these competitors go on to have incredible Schmoedown legacies. Mara goes on to become a multiple-time Innergeekdom champion, arguably the second greatest Innergeekdom player of all time. Whether you have a 2 or 3rd, that's not going to be an insult. She's one of the fact that given the competition of Innergeekdom, and she's easily top 5, probably top 3, she will. And then Rachel goes on to be arguably in the Schmoedown Rushmore, being a player that wins multiple belts, both in Innergeekdom but also in teams, being arguably one of the greatest teams in all time with the Shirewolves. So both these competitors, it's not like this was a painful match and then the competitors never got a chance again. That's partially why the Janine versus Marisol match is so painful for me, because after Marisol versus Janine never gets that chance to go for the singles belt the same way, despite being so close to beating Marisol. And that's not true with this match. Both these competitors go on to have great careers and great wins and great moments, even though this match was so painful on both of them. But even with knowing that, you still watch that match and there's a pit in your stomach. In some ways, and I'm really interested also to hear what you guys think. So put this in the comments. What were your thoughts on this match now when you first watched it? Do you think you could go and rewatch it based on the circumstances and stuff like that, or what are your thoughts of a rematch of this match? But it's as I said, there's we had to start with this match because there's no other match we could start with, just because of how the circumstances, how influential it is, how clearly how great the product is, but also some of the moral quandaries when you watch this match, or you think about, or you feel in some ways. And both these competitors, just like, as I said, it's like Larry Bird versus Magic. It really feels like 2 Hall of Famers before they're Hall of Famers going toe to toe, even when one of them's both not on their A game, but still their B game is most people's A game. So just so much to dive into that match. And that's why out of all the matches we could have started with to do a match breakdown, it feels like this had to be the first one.
Yeah. The only time these two ever played too.
Absolutely. We never got the rematch, which I think might honestly be good. Like, even if the Schmoedown came back and they both unretired, I kind of don't want to see the rematch. Like,
I do kind of like that this incredible match is just the moment in time. This was their rivalry, and I loved how respectful they were of one another during it too.
It's definitely one of those matches that proves that, like, listen, we don't always need one person to hate the other or have a huge rivalry. It felt like both of them were on the same team, and that team was anti-Mike Kalinowski. Listen, whoever wins this match, we don't mind. You just got to take that guy down next, the guy you're playing next. Because I don't mind if you win the tournament. You don't mind if I win the tournament. But we both mind if he wins the tournament. So this was like the match almost of like, it's almost like if Superman and Batman had like a respectful like chess match. It's like, listen, whoever wins is going to be the one. Or you know what actually this felt like? This felt like the Superman versus Flash races they would have for charity in the comics. Like that's kind of more the feel. It's like, listen, whoever's faster, we don't mind. We just know we're both good guys. And then we know that if you are faster, let's just focus on beating Darkseid, okay? If you beat Darkseid, that's perfectly fine. If I beat Darkseid, that's perfectly fine. I don't want to compare Kalowski to the ultimate villain, but that's what he was within the Schmoedown at this time and moment. He was the Darkseid.
Absolutely. All right. Like Josh said, leave your thoughts on this match in the comments below. Josh, where can people find you?
They can find me here. I'm not doing much content stuff other than this, but I really do love this show. Let me go. We read all the comments, so let me know what you guys think. Let us know what you guys think. And listen, do you have any topics you want us to cover? We'll definitely put that on the list. We got a long list that we have planned, but any topics you guys have down, let us know, and we can put that down. Let us know your thoughts on this match. Do you think this is the greatest match of all time? Just let us know, and listen, support LGR. I truly do love LGR. It's one of the greatest communities I've ever been a part of. Join the Patreon. I could not say more nice things about LGR and the people who run LGR.
Thank you for that, Josh. If you have not seen this match, it is up on YouTube. I'm not sure if they've gotten to it yet in uploading on the new archives channel for the Schmoedown, but it is still on the Collider Extras channel. So if you just search for Cushing versus Knopic, it'll come up. It's a phenomenal match. And we really would love to know your thoughts on it. Since you're here, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please remember to subscribe. Click the notification bell if you want to. I don't think you have to because I don't think it works anyways. And then we will see you back here next month for another edition of Nostalgia Crackdown. See you guys.
It's for real.